Today we're playing Miss Fortune Aurora, a decklist straight out of the CCS event in Atlanta. Took 11th place, and even though they got that far, I do still think some of the choices are interesting to say the least. After getting a couple more reps in, today we're going to be playing up against Lux, a decklist that does have the removals for some of the bigger things, especially in the Mindsplitters and the Mountain Drakes. But when it comes down to it, the Dazzling Aurora is just overwhelming for a deck that's that slow, giving us the time we need to establish the runes we require to not only play the Auroras, but likely just start hard casting the units at large. And really what I need from you in the comment section down below, before you hop into the games, how do you A, feel about Dazzling Aurora, and honestly B, what are the changes that you would make? Because I got some in mind myself, but I think this list can be a bit more optimized for one of the most feast and famine types of decks out there in the game. Starting the game off here, we got a shuffle going. This is, of course, a bit of a casual match here. 4 cards drawn, and we are going to be mulliganing some cards straight away to make sure we can find our Dazzling Aurora, which is in our opener. So we need some ramp to make sure we get there. Now, again, we know our opponent is going to be playing things a little bit slower, and so I kind of fast track my way into my 3 runes. And of course, we have a bit of ramp going on. Now, my opponent playing Lux is also going to be benefiting by playing giant spells, and so we have to make sure that when we play our units, we're also ready for that. And we're in a good place in terms of our ramp. We have 7 runes right now, which means we untap to 9, we can slam Aurora, and we're putting pressure on our opponent. Thankfully, this isn't a color pairing on my opponent's side that has any type of counter magic, so I don't have to worry about that. But when it usually comes down to something like green, that may be something I would have to worry about, and I may not just be throwing out Aurora there. For now, my opponent counts out some of their runes here, starts establishing some things that reduce costs, and is able to find some units to start pressuring board, and I'm fine. I have nothing to do here. Even if I did had things that could throw that away, I think it's better for me to hold my interaction once my units are out on board here. So they go to reinforce 1. And at this point, my other battlefield is there to punish them if they choose to conquer that battlefield. And that's really my plan here. Try and force 1 and make sure they can start cycling runes on the other. Now I go to flip off my Aurora, and we get into a Mindsplitter, which is probably the best thing I can flip going into something big mana. So what they then choose to do is kind of deal some reduced power, I should say, to one of their units to be able to draw a card. I take a look at their hand, and I'm looking at kind of taking out some of the big spells that they have. A lot of damage base, not necessarily just straight up destroying a unit, which is perfectly fine. And at this point, I'm sitting pretty. Again, a bunch of small units is not going to bother me. They untap to 2 points. They're nowhere near getting anywhere in this game. Of course, as I mentioned, this is going to be a favorite matchup for us. It's really our game to lose. It just means that we have to play things a little tight as well. On my next turn, I do have the option to play out the Miss Fortune champion from that zone over there, and then potentially start moving things around when it comes to gank. Now, obviously, I want to be a little bit careful. I don't want to be recycling my runes as well, but of course, conquering 2 is going to be one way to win. My opponent here passes from there, and I find myself some removal spells, which is going to be great in terms of clearing out some parts of the board. And I also have some ways to clear things out if they commit too hard. So I'm going to pay 2 runes here and then recycle 1 to be able to destroy their champion. And then at that point, I'm looking at kind of balancing some of their units or kind of responding. And at this point, I'm going to go straight to combat and force some action because I know what's in their hand. I took a look there. And so we're going to make sure, at least at this point, that yes, my unit kind of goes away and I have to force that action, but I'm also then going to recycle some runes here and float some to be able to destroy that unit on that battlefield, clearing things away, because this Great Aurora is going to be free value. I at this point never really need to cast anything at any point. So I choose not to go for that kind of unit outside of my champion zone here. I get the 9/10 in a fantastic spot against a deck that generally is doing 3s, 6s, stuff like that. They need multiple spells and multiple units to be able to deal with this 9/10, which is generally the power of it. As much as I'm looking to replace this card in the deck list, it is a powerful card just being relatively generic. And so at this point, I'm going to, as they move that unit over there, make sure it's exhausted and push it off. I'm looking to take the advantage here. So I untap with 2 more runes, find myself a Primal Might, which isn't going to be terribly relevant. One of the cards that genuinely I'm looking to replace. I just don't think it's that strong, but I see the merit for it in general. I also have right now 7 runes, which allows me to play my champion accelerated if I so want to, but I choose not to. I'm just going to play it out. I'm going to spread things out here, and I got the Mindsplitter. I'm also going to kind of have that played out, and also I'm going to reinforce my 1 kind of battlefield here and force my opponent to interact with it. Again, leaving the champion behind in case there's anything that specifically affects battlefields. I want to make sure something is clear and allowed to then start ganking and moving things around, because as I conquer, as I move, that champion's going to be really, really useful. So at this point, we have some spells coming down. We have some things being reduced, and I have my champion ability to move some things around if I want to. At this point, the spells are coming down. Cards that cost more are allowing my opponent to draw cards. And of course, I still have the reinforcement of the Mindsplitter there, so they can't do too much, right? They can't do too much. Now, they are going to go in for a bit of a challenge here, especially with that 2-cost unit that goes up in might every time you play out a spell. And they're going to reinforce to be able to remove something like this. This is the type of action that I'm looking for, them all committing multiple spells and multiple units just to be able to get rid of 1 battlefield, and it's barely going to be favorable for them. And at that point, I'm going to respond with my action to just recycle some cards. They ruin all of their whole play, and it's just kind of GG's from there, and that's where my opponent concedes. Now, hopping into game number 2, we're not going to cut out too much here because there's no sideboard plan. My opponent actually doesn't have a sideboard of their own, but what I'm showcasing there is I would actually play that 1-cost spell that prevents any type of spell damage. It would be optimal here, but just to be fair, because we are playing casual match, my opponent doesn't actually have any sideboard plan with this deck that they have, so we keep things even and we just go straight out to another game in this case. When it comes to the battlefields, there really isn't too much of a difference of what I would be looking for. There are ways that I can kind of punish them, and I ultimately kind of go for the same battlefield. But really at this point, it's about finding Aurora. If I can find the Aurora, then we just win the game. And I think that's the truth for most Aurora decks. But there is a subtlety in the fact that there are some matchups where you don't just slam Aurora. There are some matchups where you do. And the hand that we have doesn't have Aurora in its opener. I had to kind of pitch some cards to the bottom there. But that's fine. We can flip into them. We'll recycle cards. We'll push those back up on top. We have some ramp. We are going to be drawing out into 4. And that's going to allow us with that Aurora draw to really get to where we need to be here. So again, being out into that 4, we are not a monocolor rune deck here, but apparently we are based on what we have. But we will ramp out 2 more runes here. I reveal a Mindsplitter accidentally, so in all fairness, I will go to shuffle just to re-randomize the deck here. And then when it comes down to passing the turn, I'm in a great spot because I'm going to be untapping to 8 runes, which isn't optimal. And of course here, again, this is a casual match. Yes, there are supposed to be 2 of those generic units at the bottom. I'm happy to put those there if we need to. I'm not trying to ignore any type of cheating that may or may not be happening on screen, but we're just showcasing a little bit of gameplay from Miss Fortune without anything that terribly matters. Now, at this point, we go out into 8, and I'm thinking about whether or not I should save this Mobilize, because if I'm unable to ramp, I do draw a card. So there is value in that, but ultimately I'm just going to go for it because maybe there's a world where once I play out the Aurora, I untap to enough and I am just hard casting my units. So that is also something to think about. So for now, I set up my champion unit, play that out, and then I'm going to just force my opponent to interact with it because they have to force me to have the Aurora on their turn. And this way I can potentially just force down some runes so that they can't react or use any type of spell that I may not be aware of. I'm not familiar with the Lux list, to be honest here. So they go to use their 2-cost and challenge out a battlefield. I'm perfectly fine with that. They can get themselves out on board and they leave up some runes. At this point, I believe that's what they're counting out, especially with their champion ability, allowing them to kind of play out some spells as well with the additional mana. I'm recycling here because I forgot to recycle some runes, and of course you have to play fair, you can't be cheating. And then they play out another unit onto their battlefield to reinforce. I go to draw, I find myself a Volibear, which again, once I'm able to hard cast is going to be important to have as many runes as possible. Now, for now, we are going to play out the Dazzling Aurora, recycle the 2 appropriate runes, and we're just going to pass from there. At this point, I mean, we can challenge, we can force some action that we know that they have, and really all that is of course we know it's going to be dead. I don't need to challenge the empty zone. I just need to challenge and force action if it involves the unit itself, because I know the late game here is kind of solidified. Getting out the Volibear is pretty much the done deal. Like that, they really have to work hard to get rid of a unit like this, and that's how we seal out this game. Something that has shield and the tank and just such high crazy stats, and the fact that they don't know we have another one in hand is going to be fantastic for us. So at this point, we untap to 10. Kind of recycle 1, look at their hand just to clear out a little bit of interaction before we go into any type of combat. And we're looking at a pretty fair spread of items here. Again, a deck that, not items, I should say spells, a deck that is looking to generally cast some big spells. I am then hoping to kind of clear that out. And so I think like Sabotage has to be that stock list. Like if you're playing this type of strategy, you have to be making sure to remove cards from their hand before you go about your actions, especially on pre-turns. If you're looking to set up and force your opponent to top deck into the perfect answer, sometimes that's exactly what you have to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce away one of their units there, because I know with that unit there, they have the damage they need to challenge that. And so I'm going to remove that, conquer that unit. I've now dealt with one of their units. I got out a 9-10. I'm going to go to reinforce that one battlefield, and that's pretty much going to be locked down for me. That's it. Like, this is how we start establishing this end game. They have 20 damage that they have to go through. How do they even overcome this? How do we even do this at this point? And you know, my opponent's thinking, right? We got a bunch of runes coming down, 5 in total, tap down, 2 recycled, and we're going to be dealing some damage. We're thinking about it. We're doing it. And this is what I like to see about Riftbound. Like, the odds may be stacked against you, but there's so many things you can do. Like, look at that unit right now that is specifically able to gain some might off of spells being cast. There's a lot of powerful things that you can do to take a super large unit just away. So the Volibear is now gone. And so now that thing being at 4 is going to be able to deal the damage it needs to that 9 cost here. And I'm pretty sure that's where that count kind of gets at. This is just kind of the kamikaze route of having to deal with the units. And so I push that back, and that's exactly what I need to, again, seal out this game. I don't need my units. I just need a force action. And then now the way this card works here, especially with the Catalyst, if you have 1 rune left or 0 and you go to channel with it, it still allows you to draw your cards. Right? Again, even if you only have 1, I'll use the ganking to first move my unit to see if any action is being made. I will then confirm with my opponent that this is indeed how this effect works. And of course, I've gone better with this deck because I'm finally using my champion ability. Draw my card. I will deal 1 damage to that unit over there just to make sure they can't do anything spicy. The board is clear. I will end the turn, go down to the Aurora, and I will reinforce going to 20 might again. At this point, it's going to take a miracle for them to win through this game again. Like win through this turn and deal with all these with no active units. It's going to be an absolute nightmare for them. But they are tapping out runes. They're still trying to play this game. They're going to play out a bunch of units and actually go wide. I actually audibly asked them in this game, hold on, who's the aggro deck here at this point? I thought we were both big mana strategies. And funny enough, one thing that I remember from this game, my phone was actually dying, and I'm like, oh my God, my opponent's actually potentially making a comeback here. And my phone's at like 2% recording this, and I may actually lose. So what I do is I untap, go up on points here, and I go to activate the ganking to go into the other zone here. And my opponent kind of just completely forgets that's a thing. And then I kind of untap to the appropriate runes, play out a giant 12 cost, go to the go to the Aurora, and I think my opponent can kind of concede here. I'm not sure if they're really gonna win, because now with both bases loaded, if you will, with the baseball terms, 5 points on the field, they have to deal a lot of damage, and they can do it. They can do it, as you can see. But with the ganking from my champion here, if they only deal with 1 base, I'm gonna untap score and then be able to move one of my double used areas and then double conquer and get the points I need. we have the game kind of sealed up here. There is no way the kind of necessary damage is being dealt. And we ultimately, opponent goes with the kamikaze route here. And yes, they conquer. They put themselves up a point. But again, I think they're fatally forgetting the fact that even though regardless of what I draw, I'm just going to gank to the other area. And then they realize, yeah, it's time to concede. GG's there. And that's the Aurora gameplay. Yes, the Lux matchup. It's very possible for them to come back into this game, especially with the changes I want to make to this deck list with some of the smaller units that have a bit more utility across other matchups. That is the type of deck list that actually would have gotten eaten alive by that deck. So I got to give a shout out to Lux. It is very possible. But when it comes to just generically against just large characters like this, large units, I'm not really sure if I'm sold again on the Mountain Drake and maybe on the full set of Volibears. I think there is potential to even switch around this Miss Fortune. There's a lot of things that I want to do with this deck list. Let me know if you want to see more gameplay with the deck list change. Let me see, let me know if you want to see more of it against other leaders with this specific deck list. I'd love to hear your comments down below. And of course, again, if I'm playing butt doo-doo caca, like I'm just learning this game, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to improve.